Okay, first of all, Nina, I want to welcome you on our show. This is the very first time we're getting together, and we wanted to perspective of a Russian expert from that region to let us know what's going on. How are you, and what's up?
Thank you for inviting me. I am well. There's a big time difference between us right now. This is Sunday night for me, Monday morning for you, which I think is sort of speaks to the way that multipolarity has been developing in the last few years. So I'm ready to discuss Russia. I don't live in Russia, but I was born and raised in Russia, so it was also my academic specialization. It's something that I follow on a daily basis. So hopefully, I'm equipped to cover your questions.
Nina, thank you very much. First of all, let's like walk backwards from today. America is exerting a lot of pressure on India to cut their trade ties with Russia. What is going on there, and how do you look at this?
Well, there are sort of different ways to look at this. So, first of all, obviously, India and Russia are in BRICS. So, there's that relationship there. Now, when it comes to the last 3 years since the launch of the Russian special military operation, which is what the Kremlin calls it, in February 2022, Russia has become arguably the most sanctioned country on earth. However, both countries in the EU, for example, that implemented these sanctions and countries outside of the so called rules based order have been bypassing sanctions. So countries that implemented sanctions were bypassing or have been bypassing their own sanctions. So one major area here is energy. So, for example, Europeans are no longer purchasing Russian energy, but they're using third countries such as India. So it's sort of a bizarre way of bypass their own sanctions and pay more for what they were getting, without that markup prior to 2022. So there is that point of contention. So when it comes to Trump's statements regarding India, he issued multiple statements regarding India and Russia, for me this week, for you last week, right? So he initially said that I think he called both Russian and Indian economies dead. Correct me if I'm wrong. This was a pretty bombastic. I don't remember if it was a tweet or if it was on his Truth social media. It was somewhere on social media. At the same time, on Friday, he issued a statement that yes, India will go along with a little bit of pressure, as I guess in his opinion. From our perspective, it could be seen as maybe an ultimatum. However, the latest news, from what I've checked, is that there are sources. Of course, they're not being identified, coming from Washington, that India is going to continue purchasing both Russian oil and weapons. So I think it's sort of unclear as to where this particular iteration of Trump's tariffs and this whole trade war will end. But if we look at it in a broader perspective to see what happened, for instance, with China, where the ultimatum was quite significant, but then both sides sort of, especially the American side, sort of walked back down and have been in negotiations since. We can maybe look at it from that perspective. Now, obviously, China is more powerful than Russia and India, but there is that, again, that BRICS format that would be relevant here. So I don't think that particular situation has been resolved, but the way that Trump has been acting has been interpreted in many ways. Some people like to think of him as a shrewd negotiator because of his business background and say that he just makes such statements to get some kind of a reaction and to basically improve his negotiating positions. Others say it's a little bit more about his personality quirks, right? Let's call them let's refer to them in this way, where he seems to almost idolize certain people, and once they're not doing what he thinks they should be doing, he devalues them pretty dramatically. You can look at certain members of his initial administration in 2016. I believe Michael Flynn was there for like 22 days. And there are many, many other examples where there seems to be this big gap between him seeming to be this big fan of someone or something, and all of a sudden then there's this radical change in his perception. And so if we go back to Russia, he used to make very complimentary comments about Putin. The anti-Russian media, or let's call it the Western media consensus, would call Trump being, a little bit of a Russian puppet in their opinion. They would criticize him for this. And so because he would, according to them, perceived Putin as kind of a strong man. However, with this recent Ukrainian war ceasefire negotiations fiasco, Putin hasn't been going along with what Trump has been trying to pressure him to do. And so it seems like now Trump, in my opinion, may feel slighted if you go with the psychological interpretation. And I might be wrong. It's just one of the interpretations out there. And so he's sort of going like way, way, way out to the other side as the pendulum swings. And he's been sort of much more aggressive towards Russia. He's changed the deadlines for his ultimatum. Remember, initially it was a couple of months. Then he changed it to, I think, 10 days. Then it was sort of more than 10 days, less than 50 days. So that's been changing a lot as well. So it's not easy to understand which one of these may be true, other than we get what we get. But I think we also shouldn't obviously Trump's personality is relevant, but it's not the most relevant thing here, because American foreign policy is generally quite consistent, especially since 1991, right, since the controlled dissolution of the Soviet Union, when the US was handed this gift, its unipolar moment. Now, of course, it's not as powerful as it was in the 90s and the early 2000s, but it's still a superpower, and it certainly acts as one. And so the Kremlin has made statements about its perception of US foreign policy in the same vein, where they weren't really expecting a huge change with the previous administration or with the current administration as well. And so you can interpret this in many ways too. You could say, well, once the US foreign policy system was set in place, it sort of replicates itself. It's hard to go against the existing structures and people when you're just one man. There are all of these constraints around you, even if you have the best intentions, even if you made certain elections promises, which in Trump's case was to end the war in Ukraine very, very quickly. I think he said 24 hours. It was something really dramatic. But it definitely had a positive reception, even though it was dramatic, from his voting base. And so maybe it's a matter of constraints and the realities that exist within Washington, the different factions that are there. Some people talk about the deep state. I don't really think it's necessary. You can talk about the system. To me, that makes more sense, but it doesn't ultimately matter. But at the same time, you also have the personality of each particular leader. So there might be some smaller deviations, and I think this is what we're seeing with Trump, where he may have had certain intentions, and then he met resistance within the system that basically replicates itself. B, he has a particular personality where he either is playing hardball when he negotiates, thinking he'll get a better deal for the United States, or it is an issue of personality. He may feel slighted and then he lashes out. Certainly, it might be an act, but the case with Dmitry Medvedev, right, the former Russian president, prime minister, and of course he's still in government, posting. He's known for his bombastic tweets. This is what he does. Just reacting to that and talking about sending submarines to nuclear submarines to defend Lindsey Graham. It's a little for us as outsiders, looking in. It's not clear whether this is a case of really just being so, feeling so aggressive when you see a tweet on social media, or whether there's something else going on behind the scenes that we may not understand yet. So
Yeah, Nina, let me just take a second and move back to India and Russia relation, then we'll come here. Uh, India doesn't only have a relationship of fuel and energy with Russia, it also has military technology and other things as well. So, in case India shies away from energy, do you think this would cast a shadow on the military relation with Russia?
India has been very neutral, I guess, if you can use that term, within BRICS, because Russia and China, when we talk about the original BRICS, right, the five countries, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Obviously, now there are other countries that are part of the organization, countries that are aspiring to have some kind of cooperation with BRICS, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a couple of issues related to the way that BRICS is structured. Initially, it was not taken seriously, right? When it was first founded over a decade ago, it was seen to be as this almost like discussion club outside of the Western consensus. And based on a lot of the negative publicity in the last few years, it seems to be taken seriously now. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the rise of China, where China has been dominating economically in various spheres, which of course is why the US feels threatened, because it seems to be more interested in dominating rather than cooperating in terms of being used to being a hegemon, and all of a sudden its position is being threatened. So in that particular context, China and Russia, and especially China, have been sort of trying to create something more concrete when it comes to BRICS, right? When they are talking about multipolarity, it is an idea of a real alternative to basically the West, right? The West is a loaded concept, but I think we both understand what we mean by that. At the same time, India has been sort of trying to work with everyone, to put it diplomatically, trying to maintain its relations with the US, trying to maintain its relations with Russia. Obviously, the relationship between India and China is not ideal, so that also is an issue for BRICS as an organization. So I think it remains to be seen what India will do in this case. But so far, it's sort of been sitting on the fence. And I mean, I could sort of understand it from the perspective of wanting to have a multi-vector policy and trying to maybe get something beneficial for your country from each foreign policy interaction. But at some point, it might come to a point where you have to make a decision. And I'm not sure if this is the point or if there's going to be another point later on, but it's definitely significant because obviously India is a large country with a large population. Its economy is, relevant definitely to in terms of rankings and global economy, it's quite relevant. So yes, I think it will have an impact on what Russia is doing economically. But so far, Russia has been able to maneuver this really dynamic and murky post-2022 world, right? In terms of trying to diversify its trade partners, trying to basically navigate it in ways that I think a lot of people were not expecting from it. And it's not quite autarkic, but it's sort of moving in that direction, which I think surprised even fans of Russia, that it would perform as well as it has under the circumstances.